Good morning. I've taken some time to reflect since my last video. I actually suppressed some of my other video content, and I probably may not release it again because I had a different energy at that time, and there were things going on in the world around me that conjured up a lot of anger. And while I'm not trying to suppress any of my emotions because I don't think that that is useful, I still wanted to censor those video content because I think that I can say all that I said there in a new way that is more edifying and more uplifting and more connecting for my listeners, my viewers. Today's topic will be a brief one. I've been kind of reflecting more on the notion of impermanence and sort of gaining an insight of the cyclical nature of reality. Right? And I'll give you an example right now. I've been thinking a lot about clouds and water. And I realized that the water that we drink fell from the sky, from the clouds, which is water in a gaseous form, right? That's what we call it. Water in a gas, in the form of gas. Even though this neither is nor is it not the name of water, but it is what we identify. Right? It's a symbolic value in our culture. So that water that fell from the sky didn't cease to exist. It continued from gas into liquid. There's no break in the chain, right? So we can't say that the cloud no longer exists. We can't say that the cloud has non-being. It just transformed. It continued. So these clouds continued once conditions were right to convert from clouds into water, into liquid water, and they fell to the earth. And through a series of processes, it ended up in my pipes of where I live, in my location, right? And it ended up in my cup. Today I've got this M&M cup of coffee, right? Filled with water and plants. But that water that fell from the sky and is in my cup goes into my body and still does not disappear into non-being or non-existence. It continues into my cells. It continues out of my body as my body determines what it needs from it and what is no longer useful for it. And so the parts that leave still continue on back into the earth, right? In the form of our modern plumbing, and go back out into the water system. And if you studied wastewater and what happens, or just waste in general, in our plumbing system, you'll know that there are locations with big open structures of wastewater that sit out in the earth, right, in the sunlight. And there's a whole mechanical process to sanitize the water and everything, but the water is still exposed to the environment. And so over time, that water will evaporate, right, some of it, into the sky again and become the clouds. The water that stayed within me, that keeps my blood loose, right? That keeps my blood hydrated. Whenever I do a physical activity, I will sweat. And when that evaporation occurs, that water too continues back into the sky to become the cloud all over again. And it's just this never-ending continuation. It's never-ending cycle. And it's the same thing, though it's harder to see for us. And this is why we suffer when we think of animals, right? The things that we eat, plants, right? Or the cow, or the pig, whatever meat, or the bird, right? So no matter what we consume, or plants, right? Eventually that waste from that, whatever our cells don't use, goes back out. Now there's a closer degree of waste to nature with non-social, right? Or how should I put this? Non-human animals. There really is no distinction between anything in this universe because, as we know, all things, all forms are empty, but of the forms that live on land, they excrete waste onto the land, right? And so their waste is not contained so much as our waste now is contained in our modern plumbing system, and there's a whole process that is handled with our waste, even to the point where scientists study our waste to try to help us, they say, to see what is in our bloodstream and in our systems. But there is also a process where they were actually turning human waste into fertilizer. It's a huge business industry. Human waste is turned into fertilizer, right? But why? And see, right in there, and we always miss it because we don't concentrate. We don't follow it all the way out like that. We think of it as non-being. But our waste continued from the foods that we ate back out into a useful product called fertilizer, right? And it's only that because it contains essential elements and minerals that once combined with the mud, with earth, can help proliferate life. And is an endless continuation. Here's another example. When you breathe, just like you know that there can be no left without the right, there can be no out-breath without in-breath. It's an endless chain. And if there's no in-breath, then there's no out-breath. So no matter if you are breathing and alive or not breathing, and we say dead, the chain is unbroken. Where there is death, there is also life. Because if you're not breathing in and out, right, then you have your manifestation has collapsed. Right? And now you are continuing. And there's all sorts of cellular processes that are breaking the tissues down, breaking the calcium down, these heavy elements that come from the explosion of stars back into the cosmos to be remade anew. And we don't live long enough, nor do we concentrate ourselves powerful enough to see that continuation. But that in-breath and that out-breath is constantly circulating. Not just in your blood, but back into the environment always. It always continues. That's a cycle. So, not only the food, but the air we breathe, the heat, right? There's another one, because we're made of 4 elements, right? Earth, heat, air, and water. All of these circulate, always. So the heat, right? our body's temperature. Medical scientists call it homeostasis. The ability to maintain certain systems of the body, in this case heat, temperature. Well, we know that without the sun, it would be very, very difficult for us to maintain livable temperature, because our ability to maintain our temperature internally is dependent also upon the external temperature. There's a flow between them, right? This is the way this universe works. So that if the external temperature declines, the internal temperature will transfer heat from the system out. Right? Because the system, in this case, being the body, so it will transfer it out into the external environment. Right? And decrease the temperature of the body. In an attempt to try to increase the temperature of the environment. So it's always from high to low. Right? If the external temperature increases, right, then the internal temperature, right, will increase, because now the temperature outside of the system is greater than the temperature inside the system, and so the temperature will flow inward, raising the internal temperature of the body to a point that may collapse the form. So the form can collapse in either extreme, but it's maintained in an equilibrium-like. It never equilibrium. In biological systems, equilibrium is impossible, because true cellular equilibrium is death, right? Because it's a balancing off, but it's a continuation, right? It's a endless stream. But I think scientists may have to rethink their views of death. So there's really no disconnection of the human body from the earth, from the surroundings, from the cosmos. Everything that is the cosmos is the body, and everything that is the body is the cosmos. And so when I think about it, I think that if I were to mistake my body for some separate structure, then I would miss the fact that my body is grounded in these four elements and is actually greater than this dimension, right? Because I am the ocean water, and I am the elements: calcium, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur, hydrogen, carbon. Right? I contain the earth. I contain water. So all of these things, right, are me. And all of these things are manifestations. All of these things are combinations of other things that make them, right? So, really, at about 13 minutes and some odd seconds of this video has really been about impermanence, being and non-being, and emptiness, which is sort of a now applied form of the last video on Nirvana. And more will come. More will continue. But that has sort of been my dwelling of my thoughts. That if ever I find myself sad or anxious, I realize that I root myself in my cosmic body through an internal awareness, or rather through insight, I should say, right? Through insight. That there's nothing in here that's reaching out to try to understand what is out there. What is out there is in here, and what is in here is out there always. There was never a disconnect. The external and the internal flow. Thank you.